In this episode, we continue the series on the ACT model of therapy. In the first, we looked at gently accepting the emotions that we are experiencing. In the second episode, we looked at moving from that acceptance into committed action based on our values. But I might have you say to me, but how do I do that? I'm just so overwhelmed by these emotions. They are just so controlling. How do I get to that point where I'm not controlled, where I'm not that marionette puppet controlled with these emotions or by these emotions? And so what we want to look at now is a principle and a tool called dropping anchor. This is not for us to get rid of the emotions. It's not for us to have that goal of, I don't want this in my life. But it's a matter of saying, how do I get to hold this gently without it controlling me? As we know, sometimes emotions can be incredibly strong, and sometimes we do get to a point where we just feel totally overwhelmed by it. And so this is just a really practical idea of what to do when you would use that word overwhelmed, or just this is too much. How do I even make the right choice now moving forward? So Russ Harris, in his books and his videos and training, has a lovely memory tool for this in the word ACE. So that's ACE. And so when we think about dropping anchor during stressful times and when emotions are high, we're going to remember ACE, ACE. So the first one is A, and that's for acknowledge. So we want to just acknowledge what's going on. It's similar to that first episode on the notice, name, and normalize, in the sense of just becoming aware so that we can make that choice to actually stop. If our emotions are already actually controlling us, it's super important for us to stop and just become aware. So let's acknowledge what's going on. Let's acknowledge the stress. Let's acknowledge the anxiety. Let's acknowledge the sadness, the grief, whatever it is that is feeling too much right now. We need to acknowledge it. So it's that idea of just holding this gently, acknowledging that this is here. We may not want it, we don't like it, but it is here. And if you need more information on that, go to my first podcast on holding our emotions gently. So, A, acknowledge the stressful situation that you're in. Then the C is connect with your body. As I've mentioned in the first two podcasts, we often aren't able to necessarily control our emotions and our thinking, but it's far easier to control our bodies. And so what we want to do is we want to connect with our body. There is an incredible power in just moving. And so what you might want to do is even just roll your shoulders. You might want to just stretch, find a way of just stretching yourself. And I know an example for me was quite a simple thing, actually, of just connecting with my body. My first daughter was getting married, and her fiance had asked me if I wanted to say something at the reception, and I had said, no, thanks, that's fine. But on the morning of the wedding, I just had this thoughts of things that I really had on my heart to share. And so I wrote him and said, actually, would you mind? I would like to say something. And so that was not my preference. I don't like speaking in public. I would shake. My hands would be, shaking the whole time. And so there was an aspect where I didn't want to. But then I had this, message that I felt, actually, I want to share with them. But I had been doing this training, and I was like, okay, how am I going to handle the anxiety that I'm feeling about speaking in front of people? And so I connected with my body. And the simple way I did this was that thankfully the people that were doing speeches at the reception just stood up and where they were at their place and just stood and had a microphone and then sat down again. So nobody else knew it. But when I stood up, I slipped my feet out of my shoes and I just stood there on the floor and I just felt my feet on the floor. I just connected with my body, acknowledging that there's more to me than just this emotion. Yes, these anxious feelings are here, and I acknowledged them, but then I connected with my body, and I just made that connection with the floor. A dear friend had said she was having a lot of panic attacks because of the stress in the situation that she was going through, and we had spoken about dropping anchor. And she has taught me so much, because she said the one day all she needed to do, she was at the beach, all she needed to do was just feel her feet in the sand, and the panic attack calmed, her heart rate dropped back to normal, and she felt safe again. She was also one that said to me, it was just for her, it was being spontaneous and just doing something physically, whether it's running down to the post box on their rural property, or just doing some star jumps, or whatever it is. If you're in a meeting, you may want to do something that's more subtle, like what I did at the reception of that wedding, just moving my toes on the ground and just feeling the floor. Nobody even noticed. So you can even do small things that are just for you to just connect again with your body. So we had acknowledge the stress of the situation. C, connect with your body. Then the E of our ACE acronym is engage with the world around you. So in my situation at that reception, it's about using your senses. So we've used our body, but let's use all of our body in the senses that we have. And so for me, I focused on just speaking directly to my daughter and her new husband. That was what my focus was, looking at them and speaking to them, because that's who I was speaking for. So other examples is going and sitting, and if you're in a high stress situation, can you make yourself a nice cuppa, whether it's a cup of tea or coffee or something nice and warm to drink, and go and sit somewhere where you can really savor and enjoy having that warm drink, and you can maybe have a look around at a beautiful scenery. Can you get somewhere where you can just see the sky, where you can get outside and hear the birds? Just listen. Use your ears. Listen. Use your eyes. Look around you. Just connect. And if you're in a meeting or a situation where you can't just go away, just look around you. Notice the colors. I have a lovely example of this with my young daughter when she was 6. And I don't remember what situation had come up and why she was upset, but she was overwhelmed by the emotions, and she was sobbing. You know, when a child cries so much that they can almost not get enough breath in. And my husband had asked her to just try and breathe and, just take deep breaths, but she was just over herself, and so she couldn't even concentrate on her breathing. And so, breathing is often something that people will suggest, but the reality is sometimes that's actually too hard. So let's use our other senses in those situations. And what I did with my daughter is, when I heard that this was going on, I went in and I said, can you find something that's blue in your bedroom and tell me, what do you see that's blue? And so she immediately stopped crying and just looked around the room, and she told me this was blue and that was blue. And I said, okay, and what's green? Picked another color, and she told me a couple of things. And then I said, okay, now, do you want to tell me what's upsetting? What's going on? And so she started talking, but as she got into the story and she started engaging with these thoughts, she started crying again, and it became overwhelming. So as soon as she started crying, I said, oh, can you tell me something that's pink? And we picked another color, and so she named a few things for me. And I said, okay, do you want to try again? Tell me what's going on. And wonderfully, that time she managed to talk to me about it. So I wasn't invalidating what was going on. I was acknowledging that there was this sadness here, but I was helping her to engage with the world around. And it was just a simple thing of looking around and spotting some colors. And we've done that a couple of times since, where she knows it's a helpful way to just get her back inside her body and out of this thought control that's just, that puppet on a string where those emotions are controlling her. And so we want to make sure that we don't miss out that first step of acknowledgement. We are not trying to get rid of the thoughts and emotions, because ultimately we can't. That's the reality. Why we want to keep saying we need to accept them is that no matter what you try, and perhaps you can think about it, how many things have you tried to do in the past to try and get rid of these things? Some of these things might work in the short term, but in the long term, they aren't just going to disappear. So we need to have a different approach, and this is a very successful way of dealing with these emotions and things that are hard for us. So we want to make sure we're acknowledging the difficulty, the hard situation that we are in, or that our friend or loved one is in. Connect with our body and engage with the world around us. Now, you may have heard some of these health advice of, can you name 5 things that you see, and then 4 things that you hear, and then 3 things that you touch. Now, I had a client who said, oh, that's just so stressful because now I'm stressing about whether I found 5 things. Have I named 5 things? And it just caused more anxiety. So we've completely simplified that and just said, I can see. What can I see? I have ears, I can hear. What can I hear? Just focus on it. What can I hear? What can I feel? Feel the chair that you're sitting on. Feel your feet on the floor, as I did during that speech. Just engage with your body. If you have that cuppa and enjoy the flavors. We are not getting rid of those difficult thoughts and emotions. What we're doing is we're dropping anchor and we're keeping ourselves safe while that storm is there. So Russ uses the picture of a storm, and this is where the dropping anchor has come in to this boat analogy. If you had a boat that was in the harbour or coming in to the harbour and a storm came up, the boat would drop anchor. And there's the 2 reasons. Well, one reason is because we don't want to be controlled by that storm, and so the storm could either bash sweep that boat out to sea, or it could bash that boat against the rocks. And so we drop an anchor to keep ourselves safe. We aren't making the storm go away when we drop an anchor. We're keeping ourselves safe while that storm is blowing. So when an emotional storm blows up, drop anchor, use the ACE, acknowledge, connect with your body, engage with the world, to keep yourself safe, because the storm will pass. Sometimes these emotional storms last longer, sometimes they're quick, but our focus is being safe and just acknowledging and looking after ourselves while that storm is there. A friend had told me about a girl who'd done this massive sailing adventure on her own. And this boat was designed so amazingly that if she would capsize, it would just right itself. It would just get itself back up. And apparently quite close to the end of her adventure, there was this massive storm and the boat kept capsizing. But no matter how far this boat was dragged under the water, the design was so good that it just kept righting itself and it would just keep coming up. Now, as Christians, wonderfully, we have the knowledge that God is with us and He is helping us. And so we can hold on to the fact that He will always help us to get things up right again. If we turn to Him, remind ourselves of His promises, we can have that confidence that this design is good, our God is good, and He will bring us right side up again. If we feel like we are drowning and 3 meters under the water, we can hold on to Him knowing that He is with us. And that boat will come right, it'll come right up, side up again, and we will be afloat again. So hold on to the Lord, knowing that He will keep you safe. That's another element for us as Christians in this dropping anchor, is that our faith can be a huge addition and a help for us. Now, the idea that of this boat being safe in the anchor has been developed for me over the couple of years of counseling, as people have shared different experiences for themselves. And one client said to me, it's almost like as you grow, your boat gets bigger, and so the boat doesn't get as affected by the waves. And so I think that's a beautiful picture, that as we grow as individuals, as we learn through situations, and as Christians, as we grow in our knowledge and our love for the Lord, we and our boat and our vessel gets larger. And so that means if you think of a little kayak, if there's some waves, that kayak could easily be knocked over. Or a rowing boat, even more so. They're really light on the water, and so they could be tipped over really easily with some waves. But if you think of an ocean liner, those tiny little waves don't even bother it. It's not a problem at all. So the bigger our boat, the more waves we can actually cope with. And so this is also an important thing when we are looking at grief. People often say, oh, don't worry, you'll feel better in time. Now, people often do heal in time, but it's not because the grief gets smaller. And there's a beautiful illustration that has been designed by other people where they put a picture of a jar, and they say what people want to make you think is that if you draw a ball in that jar, over time, the ball represents the grief. Over time, that ball gets smaller. Now, that's not actually true. Grief is something that we actually never just get rid of. Again, it's not something that we can get rid of. But what really happens is, if that ball is the representation of our grief, if we allow ourselves to grow and to develop our own personalities, and we grow through these trials and allow God to make us more and more in His image, and we grow in likeness of Him, that jar, our life, gets bigger. And so as time goes on, our jar is bigger, and so that ball, that grief, it's still the same size, but in proportion to the size of that jar, it now seems so much smaller. And that's what's happening, is that we are growing, and so it's easier to deal with. Somebody else had mentioned that grief is like the ocean, that the waves just bash us around. And it's not that the grief goes away, it's just that our vessel, we get better at swimming, so that we can combine these elements. Our boat gets bigger, and so the waves don't knock us about as much. The waves probably still come for a very long time, but they don't affect us as much as we grow and develop through these difficulties and these trials that come. So we've touched on what to do when these overwhelming storms of emotions come. Let's drop anchor. Let's use the ACE. A, acknowledge what's going on. C, connect with our body. Be creative. What works for you? E, engage with the world around you. You have all these emotions and these thoughts and feelings going on that feel maybe overwhelming, but you also have a body here. You have your senses. Use them. You are more than just these emotions, so connect with that. But acknowledge what's going on. Remember, we're not trying to get rid of it. We're just connecting and acknowledging and giving space for these challenges, so that when we are then able, in a better place, to make the choices of how we want to respond going forward. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope it gives you some tools for the next time an emotional storm may come your way. Know that you're not alone, but what can you do to keep yourself safe? And again, being aware of this for others in your life. We don't need to make their storms go away, but what we can do is be supportive of them if they are going through an emotional storm. Validate what they're experiencing, acknowledge what they're experiencing, and perhaps you can very gently and kindly encourage them to somehow connect with their bodies and engage with the world. It might just be, hey, how about we go out and just go for a walk? Or let's go somewhere and sit and have a cuppa somewhere and sit in the sun. So what can we do to just be kind and acknowledge the pain, but keep ourselves safe? So if you want some audio recordings and some ideas on dropping anchor, there are a whole lot out there. You can have a search on YouTube as well and find something that works for you. But I think that's the key. Figure out what is going to help you to just keep yourself safe when that emotional storm comes your way.